on Zoom?
You're live.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. You are at House General and Housing, and today is Thursday, 8th of May. We're going to start this morning by taking testimony concerning H 348, which is an act protecting workers from extreme temperatures in the workplace, and we have, at this point, 4 witnesses. Our first witness is Ben Osha. It's Ben, what, I don't think you've been here before, have you? So we'll have the committee introduce itself. Saudia, you want to begin?
Good morning, Sadia Lala, Loyal Washington District, Morristown, Elmore, in a small part district.
Good morning, Ben. I'm Elizabeth Burrows and I represent Windsor One, which is Heartland, West Windsor and Windsor.
Welcome, Ben. I am Mary Howard and I represent Rutland City District 6.
And Emily Krasnow is behind you. Emily?
Hi, Emily Krasnow, South Burlington, Chittenden 9, and I'm on my way.
I'm Debbie Dolgan. I represent St. Johnsbury, Concord.
Wait, Debbie, we skipped Mary.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Gail Pezzo, Chittenden 20, Colchester.
40 minutes up.
No,
Tom Charlton, Athens, Chester, Grafton, Finley. Joe Parsons, Newbury, Thompson, McGraw.
Theodore Dodd, Essex County, City of Essex Junction.
Good morning, Ashley Bartley, Fairfax in Georgia.
And I'm Mark Mahaly, and I represent Calais, Plainfield, and Marshfield. Sarah, are you going to testify? Shall we have you announce yourself as well so you can both testify?
Mr. Chair, yes, if it's okay.
That's fine. We do that all the time. Yeah.
For the record, I'm Sarah Muirhoff, Director of Advocacy and Communications for the Associated General Contractors of Vermont.
Ben, why don't you tell us your name and your position, the record?
My name is Ben Osha. I'm the Director of Workforce and Training at the Associated General Contractors of Vermont.
Okay.
Yeah.
Take it away, both of you.
Okay. Where to start? So I guess where I want to start is when we first saw this come across. So let me rephrase it. So we at AGC, which is down the road, it's right by Dairy Cream, we train, I think our rough count so far was, including renters, we have about 2,800 to 3,000 people who come through our training facility this year. We had like a monumental year this year. And part of our training, whether it's the OSHA 10, the OSHA 30, any company safety day, and then any of the other renters who come through, we always cover heat stress or extreme temperature. I have a bunch of handouts, but this is just, I'll pass the thing around. This is one of the handouts we train on, and we usually spend around 30 minutes to an hour on this topic. And we have started doing this because through the federal government, federal OSHA, last August, so August 30th of 2024, they released their notice of a proposed standard, meaning they're in the works of creating a federal standard for extreme temperature. And so that was in August. It's gone through some comment periods and it's still very much in the works. And so my initial concern is with this proposed bill, it's probably going to directly conflicts with the federal OSHA one. So in terms of businesses that are dealing with this in Vermont, they're going to have, let's say this passes, they'll have to deal with these, or they'll not deal, but they'll have to work with these rules set out. And then when the federal OSHA one comes in the next year or so, they'll have a different set of requirements from the federal OSHA side. And because they're not going to be exactly the same, that's my initial concern, is that employers are going to have to be dealing with 2 different rule books for the same extreme temperature problem that there is. And then I guess the other side of that would be the impact on the local businesses as well, in terms of the changes, just because we work with all the contractors, the changes that this would bring in terms of the job sites themselves, and then the overall cost, which would then get thrown into the bid itself. So it's going to drive up prices for projects and overall make it more expensive for the customer for the product.
Question.
Yes.
Go ahead. You go ahead.
Why?
Yeah.
So if we're talking just for an example, so we're going to talk on the compliance side. So this bill speaks of doing a annually reviewed program. It talks about the site specific. Anytime in the construction side, when we talk site specific, it means project specific. So if I'm a contractor with 5 different job sites, it means that someone either, if I have a safety officer on retainer at my company, they're going to have to design 5 separate site specific extreme temperature programs. If I don't, because not every company has a safety officer, I will have to hire a subcontractor, so a subcontracting safety officer to then write those programs for me, which usually they work for around $50 to $80 an hour, sometimes closer to 100. So we have to factor in all the pricing it's going to cost to pay for the programs on the compliance side. And then when we're talking about providing shade, it talks about blocking from the sun. So if you talk like the pop-up tents you can get from Walmart, those, depending on where the sun is, don't always provide, direct sun blocking. So you're going to have to put up something more permanent, or the answer might be, we'll just get another job trailer. But a job trailer itself is costing somewhere around $300 to $500 a month to rent. And then that's if it has working HVAC and all that stuff. And then you have to set it up on the inside. So the typical job trailer has offices. So it's not, the capacity won't be able to fit everyone depending on when they want to take their breaks. You'll have to have a specific job trailer that's set up just for, temperature breaks, whether it's in the winter for the heat or the summer for the cold. So it just, a lot of that would be, I don't think was fully covered in this because there's just a lot of planning on the backside that will affect cost. Because yes.
Question for you. Are you, this bill generally with respect to heat was modeled after the proposed standards, the federal standard. It added, I'm not saying it's identical, but it was modeled after that. And then it added cold because cold temperatures are not in the federal proposal. When you say that you're concerned about conflict and impact, is it because of the addition of the cold, or are there differences between the federal heat standard and this? Or is it that you actually have problems with the federal heat standard?
Well, the federal heat standard is not, complete yet. So there can still be stuff to be added on and taken away. So we don't know what the federal one is going to look like yet. And it's not yet laid out as well as this one is. And so we don't know, what is going to be added or taken away. So why I was worried about the conflict, because that one is not structured the same as this one is. Yes.
Can I ask a few questions?
Yeah.
So I think this was taken off of our wall because the committee's done great work and we've passed several bills out of committee, and right now we obviously have several bills on our wall. And I think we're just trying to make sure that we're being efficient with the time that we have left. Would you maybe recommend we wait until, I think it's June 10th, that we're expecting around that time for the federal compliance to potentially come out? And that's even to say, okay. That's really helpful to know.
I would rather that's like I said, that's why I was concerned. I'd rather we wait to see what the federal one looks like, and then spend time just making it easier for contractors so we don't have the risk of dealing with 2 different expectations.
Although I would note that all that's happening on federal, the 5th or 5th, I don't know, it's set for hearing. It could be a year or more before a standard is issued, if under this administration one is issued at all.
But at least you would know kind of where we're going.
Right, no, I agree, yeah.
So this lovely piece of paper, thank you for providing it.
Mhm.
You provide it for everybody you do trainings for?
Every single OSHA 10 that I do, we do a 30-minute to an hour session specific to heat stress and extreme temperature. So OSHA, when they first came out with the idea of proposing this, they brought it in as an emphasis program, which they say they typically do emphasis programs while they're toying with the idea of introducing a new standard. And so when they do an emphasis program, they make it very well known that they want all companies and employers to be talking about it within the company. So even within our own employers that we deal with, like our member side, they've been taking requests or recommendations from their employees on, we want this type of shirt this year because it's better in the heat than that. Or a bunch of them have now moved, like my HVAC contractors. Milwaukee makes like heated vests and heated job site coats. So at least with the cold, they're taking, since this has been passed, they're taking in recommendations from employees saying, how can we better our PPE that we're giving you? And what can we do, to make your life on the job site better in terms of temperature?
So it sounds like, it's kind of an ongoing process,
Yes.
we all evolve, technology evolves. My question is, AGC's logo is on this. Did you create this document?
No, this is something that we're working with. AGC is working with OSHA and it's used as like a handout in class.
So if the bill as is passes, would OSHA, do you think, be able to provide something like this for that? Or is the onus going to be on AGC to create something like this to comply with the bill?
You're talking when the bill talks about training programs and like site-specific programs?
Yeah, so I've worked in the past with maintenance workers and having to follow OSHA and doing OSHA and VOSHA trainings. I myself have never had to write those trainings or provide these documentations.
Yes.
Whose responsibility this falls outside of OSHA?
That's where I was going
Oh,
next.
sorry, I'm just gonna wait and let you continue.
No, but it's a really good question, so I wanted to hit on that. So for AGC represents probably 200 contractors. For those contractors, a lot of them have their own safety officers where their job is creating programs for the company. The companies are our members who don't have those. I act as a free safety service where I go in and help our members. So I am the one creating the programs that most of these companies are using when they don't have, like smaller companies can't afford to hire one person as their full-time safety officer. Yeah, no,
Do you know on average how much a safety officer makes?
yes, I do. So when I do my subcontracting, I charge either $100 an hour or I charge $500 per construction site visit if I do an audit. And then any of my paperwork or filing, I'm charging right around $100 an hour. And then, but when you're a member of the AGC, that service is free because that's one of our perks to members. And I work with 2 or 3 other safety officers who also charge right around that $500 range for a straight up visit or the $100 per hour.
That's pretty awesome. Thank you.
Yes, and then just based off my experience building programs, a normal program takes anywhere from 10 to 12 hours to fully go through. Because you're talking multiple meetings with the company, the meetings with their employees, because this bill talks about the input from employees in the annual reviewing of these. So that would mean I would have to come in every year to go through this with the company during the safety day, which I'm charging hours for. And then that's just talking construction. I can help my members who don't have safety officers build these heat programs, but they can't all be the same. I have to make a different one for every single job site that they have, because it's not just one company program, it's site specific. So I've got to be doing, you take a company like SD Ireland, they have probably 20, 30, 40 job sites over the state of Vermont. I'm going to have to be building all of those programs. And then that's just on the construction type. We talk restaurants, we talk schools even. I know I graduated from Randolph Union High School and we didn't have properly working AC in all of our classrooms, especially for the staff and faculty and for the students. So it's a lot to read and talk through because I'm used to the construction world. So I can kind of say, okay, I can handle this. But then we talk the effects of, we're going to have someone in charge of creating these programs. And it's going to cost, I don't want to keep going on the money thing, because eventually the money doesn't matter. It's the safety, but it's the time and effort that's going to be needed to put into this. We're going to need a lot of people. And there's also, I think, including me, there's maybe 10 subcontracting safety officers in the state of Vermont. There's not a lot of safety, especially my age. I'm only 24. I'm very new into this field, but there's not a lot of people coming into this field, and there's not a lot of resources if you're not part of AGC or if you don't have the money to spend $100 an hour.
Do you think it makes sense? You're describing how expensive it is to do it by job site.
Yes.
You think it makes sense to do it by job site, or is it better just to do it generically?
it's better, in my opinion, to do it generically because when it's further than just the job site too. We're talking every single piece of equipment that someone is in for more than 60 minutes. When an operator is in that excavator or on that paving machine for way longer than 60 minutes, how are you going to install an HVAC system or a temperature controlled system on an open cab piece of equipment like a roller or a paving setup or any of that? It's going to be extremely challenging. So that was one of, like, I have it highlighted, the site specific. So that I think it would be much better to do a generic company program, just not even making it, I don't like the word generic, but making it easier so we're not having to build a specific program for every single process. We can have a company one that just says, these are our guidelines for heat or cold. This is what we do. Because I think it still would be very efficient, even if it was in a more generic form. It just makes it easier on the compliance side, and less confusing too for the employer.
If I may add on that note, we also live in a state with mountainous topography where climate conditions, particularly now in this age of climate change, and we're seeing more and more severe and extreme weather patterns, can differ so much based on hour of the day, which side of the spine you're on. I mean, there's a lot of variation that can happen. And so I think it could be exceedingly challenging for folks to be so prescriptive in these individual safety plans. And I think at the end of the day, the kind of through line that we're trying to get across here is that already the construction industry takes issue very seriously.
Mhm.
We do a lot of training. We tell our members, you know, if you're feeling dizzy, sit down, take a water break. Cold water is already provided on site. That's actually a separate OSHA rule
Mhm.
already. And in addition, while we are awaiting the temperatures with the heat specific OSHA rulemaking process to play out, already temperature falls under the general duty clause in OSHA. So it is not as if we're in the Wild West here in terms of any form of enforcement or, you know, safety mechanisms.
It is expected right now that employers provide water, rest, and shade through that general duty clause. And if they're not, it typically comes through as a complaint, and those complaints are taken very seriously, and inspectors do come out and evaluate. And when I'm doing my audits, when I do walk through job sites, I don't really have to because they're doing it already, but it is clear to employers that if they're not providing water, rest, and shade, proper water, rest, and shade, that does fall under the general duty clause. And our VOSHA inspectors are aware of that and do look for that when they go on job sites. So the construction industry is already basically doing what we need to be doing. It's just more of the confusion around the site specific stuff and on the paperwork side.
And I think just the hyper specificity laid out in the bill is quite a challenge. Mr. Chair, I think you alluded to this yesterday in terms of kind of right sizing these questions for Vermont. Like Ben said, there is already water, shade, rest area provided on sites, but my reading of this bill is that in order to fully comply with it, you would need your rest area to be able to accommodate the number of employees who would foreseeably take a break at these intervals. I mean, that's your entire work crew. And the question came up of staggering start times, which is a great idea of like a workaround, but that's just not for construction, especially where it's really a team effort. That's just frankly not realistic in terms of being able to stagger by like 15-minute.
With our workforce. too.
Exactly.
You talk like a flagging operation. If we're going to be trying to stagger our flaggers, I mean, we are struggling just to be able to provide 2 flaggers per job site. So the idea of being able to stagger in the break part, I don't see that as being a solution because it's just, we don't have the numbers in our workforce right now to be able to have.
Leonora.
Sorry, I didn't mean to short. I was just like, I have a question, but you don't have to ask it right now, but if you're done, I'll just ask. So just generally, on the ground, just what are kind of realistically the limits to when you would say that you say we're closing the work site because this is like the conditions are untenable and unsafe, no matter whether you provide water, shade, or breaks? Like, does that happen here?
Yeah, so the way we train right now is we talk about the wet bulb and the heat index, and we very much explain to them that even if it's 80 on your phone app, because of the heat index is actually higher, and all of them, part of the class is having them download the NIOSH heat index app, which tells you the actual temperature compared to what it is on the job. So all the foremen that I speak with, and most of the foremen that I get to interact with have this NIOSH app. All the safety officers have the NIOSH app, and it tells them exactly what it is. So typically, when it gets, it depends, because some of these are small operations and some of them are larger. But when there's a question, or because the supervisors and the foremen are trained to be able to identify. So when the question comes up, I'm not feeling well, I think it's a little hot, the job is always, then it's up to the foreman or the super to say, we're taking a break. Or the safety officer looks at the forecast for the week and says, and identifies, these 3 days are going to be our danger days, which the app will give you a notification saying you're in like I forget their wording up, but it will say like you're in a danger zone or whatever. And so when that comes through, we're looking at it closer, and then based on the employee's opinion, because it always goes back to the employees, their opinion, it's when we say, okay, we're done for today. So I guess it's not an exact temperature. It depends on the activity we're doing.
Sure.
Because if you could have it 85, but if you're on a paving crew, you're talking about extremely hot,
Right.
any of that. So sometimes it could even be 70, but if it's some weird day, or like you talk spring where we have what, 60-degree weather, and then all of a sudden there's that day that's 78. You take that into account, because it usually takes 2 to 3 weeks to fully acclimatize to the new weather. So I don't know.
One more question, just generally, if Vermont, this is just I'm not saying we're going to do this, but in theory, if we passed a bill that then was either slightly more strict, let's say like the degrees, or you're going to use, we say something that is more strict than whatever the feds come out with. Or the feds come out with something more strict than what we come out with. What takes precedence? Is it the federal rule?
I don't know the answer to that question. I think so. Is the federal rule preempted?
The federal rule would control. The states can be more protected, but they can't be less protected than the federal rule. Okay.
That was our legislative council. So he's speaking. Yes.
Can I just ask a really quick question? Is it the OSHA NIOSH heat safety app? Is it red with a?
I believe so, yeah. And then
Is it saying we should stop working?
no.
Yes.
Employment law.
I gotta remember, I have it on my work. I think it's on my work.
I'm gonna be talking to the speaker. We
Thank you.
Unsafe to
I
build
spelled it
housing.
wrong and I was confused.
Oh, yeah, I'm trying to make sure
Yes, Elizabeth.
Can you describe the role of unions in keeping their members safe, and how that might oppose or be in opposition to some of the trainings that you have?
you don't,
You don't deal with unions.
Less than 5% of construction workers in Vermont are unionized.
Okay.
I can talk to you perhaps offline about some other experience that I have in this different job about unions and their role in individual worker safety, because that is something that can be bargained for. Thank you.
So the seriousness of the heat control hazards is very, very real, understood. Do we have any numbers as to how many complaints come in a year, or how many violations there are in a year, or maybe through workman's comp? Is there a pertinent number of how many employees actually are treated for heat exhaustion or hypothermia?
so. VOSHA, are you talking Vermont specific? So
Yeah.
VOSHA on their website, they release all their current inspections and all their complaint lists. So we're able to go through and see which ones are heat related complaints or whatnot. But from at least my experience in the field, I've yet to see, because I deal with when there is an OSHA citation, I go with the company to the hearing. So out of the 50 or 60 OSHA citations that I've worked on, or the case I've worked on, none of which have been a heat specific one. Or in any of the complaints I've dealt with have not been heat specific. And then from what I could gather, because there's not Vermont specific standards or info on that, and when OSHA releases info, it's usually pretty delayed. So right now, I think you can only get up to 2023. They haven't released this year, so maybe they have. I could be slow on my computer. But from what I see, there was from 1986 to 2023, there was 348 hazardous heat related citations, and then only 85 of those were in the construction.
Nationwide.
That's nationwide. We're in the construction realm. And that's under general duty. That's before, because there are 5 states that run their own state heat. I think it's Colorado, Wyoming, Washington, and a couple of.
Can you repeat that first number, please?
So it was
340.
348 hazardous heat related citations under the general duty clause from 1986 to 2023. And 85 of those were in the construction industry
Nationwide.
And of those, I wonder, so you said that less than 5% of construction workers are unionized. Is that
In Vermont.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So my question was going to be, is that a similar case nationwide?
It really differs by state, I would say, in terms of the kind of culture around unionization, particularly in construction. Say, if you look to Massachusetts, for instance, there's much higher threshold of folks who are in bargaining units.
Thank you.
So it's hard to say, honestly, because there is so much variance.
Go ahead. Any other points you want to make?
I think we've done a really good job of covering the points that I was concerned.
I will just add that on the kind of note of prescriptiveness and tying in what Ben was saying in regards to, if it's 80 degrees and you're paving, that is going to feel in your body very different than 80 degrees, I don't know, putting up sheetrock or what have you. In the same vein, the trigger for the cold temperature regulations in this bill being 60 degrees. I mean, 50 degrees, if you're really working, if you're in the sun, if it's a sunny day as opposed to a cloudy day, it's going to feel very different in your body. And under 60 degrees can actually feel really good to be doing physical labor. And I run and I'm running in shorts when it's 45 degrees. So there's just a lot of individual factors. And so it's difficult to be so prescriptive in state statute like this when there are these kind of varying factors happening between individual temperature, elevation, and then the job and the work itself and the physicality of it.
I did have one question that came up. So let's say we're talking about shade. One of the problems that you brought up is just if you size the shade so that everybody can fit it, it might be a bigger structure than you can have. But on the other hand, there are jobs where it's a teamwork and you just can't stagger it. So what is the solution? Shade.
So currently, it's funny. So currently, which is it just works out well. Currently, the solution to shade right now is you have like we set up tents, or we have most of the job sites, maybe they'll have a pavilion or something that's built on the building, or depending on what we're building, there's just randomly, like how it is outside, there's just spots of shade around the job site. But because of, some of these wording in here, we would have to provide like that might not be up, or because it would be a site specific plan, we can't perfectly guess where the shade is going to be every day. So you can't locate that as this is your break spot and then have tomorrow there be some there and say it's not. So right now, I guess the answer is what we're currently doing is we have, as best as we can, we're setting up structures, or we're just choosing, we're going to go here today because we got 3 nice trees, but that's because we're laying a water line here, but tomorrow we're gonna be 500 yards that way, so we're gonna have to find something else. So it's very mobile and we're taking a break now, we're humans, let's just walk over to where the shade is because it's more comfortable.
So the problem is the site-specific reporting requirement plus the air conditioning, the temperature control, because you can't do that with the tents. So we use tents. If it's out in the wide open, we use tents, which can be moved around.
Yes, but yes, it's just expensive.
Unless you, of course, if people perhaps in response to a bill like this passing almost overcompensate in a way and to ensure themselves of compliance with this, get a tent with a surround and then have a circulation system. And that's extremely expensive to implement, of course.
You have a question?
Can I follow up on this? So part of this bill talks about work vehicles.
Yes.
And so a work vehicle would need to have heat or air conditioning. How many of your members or individuals on a job site are actually taking a break in their own personal vehicle? Does that ever happen?
In the winter,
Well, not in the winter, but like in the summer if they're driving themselves.
all the time,
Okay.
because you've got nice heat. In the summer, even if you have air conditioning, they're more likely to either sit on the tailgate or go somewhere. Like when they take breaks, it depends. Like if we're doing a trenching job, you'll see them, they're like all best friends. So they'll take breaks together, and I'm serious, they'll hang out together, talk about whatever. They're very not likely to go sit in their car, maybe for a quick phone call, but we're dealing with a very social group who loves to hang out with each other. That's why one of the reasons I love working in this industry so much, because we're all like good friends. But you'll typically never see someone in the summer in the truck for more than 10 minutes, like a phone call, really. And at that point, it's the foreman. And depending on where we are on that job site, all of their personal vehicles could be farther away because we've got designated parking spots due to some of the OSHA regulations. So it might not be possible for them to walk back to their vehicle. And not everyone has a company, we'll call it a company truck. Not everyone has that company truck. So their personal vehicle might not have AC, and they might not have access to a company truck because that's just for the 5 foremen or supers that are there.
Additionally, if you just think about getting in your own car in the summertime, especially if it's been in the sun, I mean,
Right.
it can take 10 minutes for your car to even cool down, and then you're 2/3 of the way through your break time.
That is correct. Yes.
Can I ask one last
Were you-
question?
Can I ask a question about your question? Were you
Sure.
concerned about having to regulate people's personal vehicles if they're on a work site?
I still have that concern. In this bill, I think or even,
I was just curious. whether
yeah,
that's what
I
you
like,
were
I
going
have that, the vehicle is a concern for me.
with. I understand.
I'm just a brat. Your last name, is that just fortuitous or
Oh, that's
did
rude.
you always want to go into
No.
training?
I went to college for criminal justice. I wanted to be a game warden. And then last minute I graduated and this opportunity popped up and I said, that kind of deals with rules and laws and kind of seems fun, and it's in Montpelier and yeah. And my dad does construction insurance and also his last name OSHA. So we both do construction stuff and we both have the last name OSHA.
Sorry, just
No, it's
an
fine.
opportunity I
Yeah.
have to ask.
Any other questions of the by the committee at this point? Well, thanks so much.
Thank you. That was great.
Appreciate your testimony.
Sweet.
I'll tell you what, we started at 10. Okay, we'll keep going. Our next witness is Casey Jennings. Casey, are you here?
My grandfather.
Thank you. It's a minute here. Let's let things settle down.
Okay.
So,
My grandfather.
John Bassler.
so Casey, you were here when we introduced ourselves.
Yes.
Want to introduce yourself for the record and
Yeah,
tell
I
us
will.
what you got?
Yeah, so my name's Casey Jennings. I live in Lunenburg. And I'm actually between jobs right now. It's my time between my summer and my winter job. I worked the last few winters at a ski area. Before that, I actually worked for the US Forest Service. So I've had a lot of outdoor jobs. So I'll touch on a little bit of that too. But basically, I'm here because this winter, so we usually had two people at the load area of the chair,
At the which area?
the ski area. I actually worked at Okemo. I've been working at Okemo for a few winters. It's owned by Vail Resorts, a very big nationwide ski resort corporation. So this was actually a nationwide thing they were pushing, but so we always had two people at the bottom of the chairlift at the load area. And we would rotate usually every half hour. On super cold days when it's like 20 below zero, we do like 15 minutes or something, just because you just get cold. You're just standing out there and the wind is usually pretty bad on the mountains. This year they decided to save money by putting one person at the chair. So that means you were outside the whole time. There's two different types of chairlifts, actually. There's detach and a fixed grip. The detach is a more modern chair. It automatically slows down as it gets to the load area and people just hop on. It's really, really nice actually to run. At that chairlift, you can actually go inside to warm up if you're alone, because you can run it from the inside buttons. You don't have to hold chairs back or anything. But the fixed grip lift, it's the older style, is just attached right to the cable. The same speed. It tends to swing as it goes around the bull wheel at the bottom.
I've
Yeah,
lost a child.
Yeah. Oh, gosh, I've seen so many incidents at the fixed grip lifts and.
Yeah.
So I was running a fixed grip lift. At the fixed grip, you have to be there the whole time it's open to hold the chair back. Which means you can't just run inside to warm up. You can't go inside to get food or water. If I have to use the phone to call for a break, you actually have to stop the lift and go inside, because you can't just leave the lift running because some kid could get clobbered. So they decided to do that, and the way they did it was pretty bad. They just said, "Oh, today you're alone, no warning." So what happened was a lot of guys were outside in pretty bad temperatures, with very few breaks, because at the same time, they cut the hours on the team leads who were supposed to give breaks. And for the past few seasons, the team leads were only really having to give breaks to the top operators because they were alone anyways, but you can basically sit inside most of the day at the top. So it's a non-issue. But they cut the hours of the team leads. At the same time, they're cutting us down to one person. So a lot of guys went with hardly any breaks for the whole course of the day. I was actually injured a little bit, repetitive motion injury to my back. I was running what they call the B quad lift at Okemo. There's two fixed grip lifts at the base area side by side. They run both when it's busy. This was back in December during Christmas, New Year's, big holiday. So I was at the B quad, or someone else at the A quad. Initially, for a couple of days, I had a couple of the really good team leads, and they were giving us breaks and making it work. But then I had a team lead who I actually told her that I was hurting, and she said she didn't want to talk about and walked away. I got like 2 breaks to go pee real quick, and that was about it for the day. But that's a danger to the worker, but also to the people riding the chairlift. Because, like, for instance, one incident I saw the first couple of days they did that. Now there were team leads giving us breaks those first couple of days. There was someone not on the chair on the other lift at the A quad. I was at the B. I was getting a break, so I could look over, and I saw one of the team leads just running over and hitting the stop up. Well, they stopped it when they were about 5 or 6 feet up off the ground. But if it was just the one person alone at the buttons, because there's so much going on down there, you're focused on that. You try to look up and make sure, people are on, but in the blink of an eye, someone falls off. So they would have made it up to one of the towers and fallen off from a more serious height. I mean, it was a non-issue because so low, but that's the sort of thing that can happen.
Excuse me, I didn't understand. This was somebody falling, or?
They were on the chair, but they weren't actually seated properly. So the team lead caught it and ran over and stopped the lift, but the person at the buttons actually running the lift did not notice it because they were, focused on what was right in front of it. Luckily, it was only about 5 or 6 feet off the ground when they stopped it and the person fell. So from 5 feet, it's not that big of a deal. It's actually not even a reportable incident to the tramway board, but from a taller, section of the lift, it would have been pretty dangerous. So it's a danger to both people working a lift and the people riding it. So eventually I brought the issue up at a safety meeting and they said some nice things, but nothing really changed. So I did file actually a VOSHA complaint. There was a site inspection. And the words of the inspector were interesting. He said he had to see if this actually broke any rules or was just a crappy situation. So in the absence of an actual rule, I mean, it was more difficult. Actually, the investigation's still open. It opened in January 9th. It's actually still open, not closed yet, 4 months later. So I don't know exactly how that's going to turn out, but a lot of people would not speak out about this. But basically, because I got hurt, I just didn't care if anyone said anything. After I got hurt, I was going to say something. It was kind of like the floodgates opened, and a lot of people came forward and started talking to the VOSHA inspector about their issues. A lot of people were not getting bathroom breaks or lunch breaks, but there's actually a state law on that. So when that complaint was brought up, it was actually fixed very quickly. So that's actually why I actually proposed something. I sent it out as a handout. This was back in February. I talked a little bit more on the Senate side to Senator Clarkson quite a bit, but it was basically to just amend the existing state law on bathroom access and lunch breaks with something about cold weather. Actually, I would say this needs to be expanded to include the hot weather issue too, but I'm just going to read what I proposed. This would amend 21 VSA section 304. But my proposal was an employer shall provide an employee with reasonable opportunities during work periods to eat and to use toilet facilities, as well as to warm up in heated spaces when working outdoors at cold temperatures, yada, yada. The rest is just the existing state law. You'd have to add some definitions to that, but that's something I was trying to get past earlier this winter, just because my experience was that other law got the other issues with bathroom access and in lunches fixed pretty quickly. But with just the general duty clause, that's pretty vague. So, whether or not a rule is being broken is kind of open to interpretation. I would say it was just based on what was going on. Like people were coming down and they were colder than heck. They had like the early signs of hypothermia sometimes, some days. And this wasn't like every day. They had a budget, as one supervisor explained to me, where corporate was coming up with a budget for how many people they could put at a lift on a given day. It was based on their financial thinking. It had no connection to weather conditions or whatever on the ground. It's just strictly money related. So our safety seemed to not really enter into the equation. And this is also a company, I'll just mention it, a few years back, they had a fatality at Stowe, another mountain they own, on a zip line. They argued with the manufacturer of their system, who said to replace, it was like a $30 part or something on the harness, like every year if it was used heavily. They argued back and forth, I guess, by email with the manufacturer and actually decided not to spend the $30 a year. Well, the harness failed and someone died. So I don't really think they take my safety seriously, which is why I'm here. And the other handout I gave you was actually just a little snippet from our employee handbook. And this is because, one conversation with somebody at VOSHA, I had some concerns. It was a Mr. Hayden, I think it was. He was the supervisor of the inspector because I couldn't get through to him. And he mentioned, and I interrupted him mid-sentence because he said, you can always go into the shack to warm up. I said, wait a minute. No, you can't. Not if you're alone. Not at the fixed grip. And this is a section of our handbook, which says right there, you basically can be fired if you leave people to load by themselves. So that's the reason I sent that in, because there was some misconception that we could just run into the lift shack and warm up whenever we wanted, which is not true. Someone has to take the button tree to do that. So that's why I think something needs to be passed. I'm not saying necessarily, the 18 pages I read through, but something. I think maybe stricter rules, when you get to like 10, 20 below zero, that's just a wild temperature. we had a lot of, my coworkers are on J1 visas. They come up here from South America. They really don't know, a lot of them, what they're getting into with winters up here. And they show up and they show up in like wearing sneakers all day. And I have to tell them, go out and buy a pair of boots for yourself, man, because they're not issued anything like that. We're not. We're given coats and snow pants, which help, and a beanie hat. But you have to supply your own gloves, and that's another issue with this, because with the fixed grips, you're grabbing the chairs all day. Well, if it's snowing or raining, your gloves get wet, and eventually they just aren't going to keep your hands warm. So that's why you really need to switch back and forth. That's why for years, that's what they did. They switch back and forth, and the person who, you know, is taking it's not really a break per se, you're on the clock, you're still the second set of eyes to watch things. And you're also the person that has to go out and shovel what we call the LCA, the low clearance area. You know, right past the load area out until the chair is high enough where skis are not going to catch, because when snow builds up out there, it actually will catch skis and pull people right out of the chairs. So the second person is also supposed to be doing that. If you're by yourself with the buttons, you can't even touch that.
Clearing the snow.
Yeah, clearing the snow, because it builds up as people are skiing out there. And it just builds up into it's almost like a speed bump is what I call it. And if people, there's different skill levels with skiers, obviously, and some people pick up on that and keep their ski tips up really good, but eventually it hits a point where you really can't avoid catching that. So the second person, you know, can go into the shack and warm up, but they're also expected to be the second set of eyes. You know, I've stopped the lift many times out there from the shack because I saw something up here and the person over here is, you know, watching over that. Because you just can't see everything all.
Do you think there are temperatures below which it's just, you can't operate?
You know, we were open when the wind chill was about 30 below a couple of years ago. And I thought it was a little crazy because I would not want to be up there, because if that chairlift breaks down and you're stuck on it, you're going to get really cold before, depending on how serious it is. If they have to do a rope evacuation, it's going to be a nightmare. That's just my personal thing. I mean, other people are willing to take that risk, and we were busy that day. So, but I really think when you get below 30 below, it's just wild. I mean, I had a day at Lunenburg where I was home and it was 35 below zero, and all I did all day was just throw wood in the wood stove, and it was just nuts, you know. But you know, I mean, I grew up here. I actually grew up in Rutland, which is not quite as cold as where my house is, but yeah, I'm used to that, and I still think it's nuts to be out there when it's like 35 below zero all day long. You know, the skiers can go inside and warm up when they want, but the person working the lift is kind of stuck there until someone takes their place. So I've also worked other jobs with the Forest Service. I worked with the State Parks Trail Crew in summer of 2023.
Just one sec, you have a question here. Go ahead, Tom.
Are Vail employees unionized?
No, not here. There are some, it's very much by department and mountain, and to my knowledge, none in Vermont are that I know, but don't quote me on that. They do have a lot of ski patrollers unionized out west. They had a big strike this winter, which made the news. Some of their mechanics are unionized. I'm not aware of any lift operators being unionized anywhere. A lot of people, like I said, are afraid to speak up because you're a target. I was treated pretty bad for speaking up. I'd walk away from jobs that paid more than that, so I wasn't really too scared. You know, but a lot of my coworkers, they're struggling, so they're not gonna just, you know, walk away from a job.
Yes, you have a question here.
So you would come to testify at our Prop 3 hearing, and I just kind of to follow up Tom's question, there's nothing preventing unionization, right?
There's nothing legally preventing it. It's
Okay, I just wanted.
yeah, it's the reality of trying to get enough people. I don't think you could get even 5 people willing to sign like I mentioned at that hearing, like I think people are afraid to organize because they're targets when they do.
Okay, great.
You know,
No,
like
great, I just
yeah.
making sure.
I know what you mean. I know what you're trying to say.
I wanted to make sure I'm like going through all of our labor statutes that like
Yeah.
they are not part of a group that would be currently prohibited.
Absolutely, we could unionize if we could get enough people to sign a card, but nobody wants to be the target signing that petition of having an election for a union.
Okay, thank you. I promise I did not mean great.
You know, like I said, I was the first one that spoke up about this stuff in his face because I walked away from better paying jobs and B, I got hurt from it, so I'm not gonna let it go.
Can I ask a
Yeah,
few
go
more?
ahead.
Sorry. So it sounds like on the day that they said you're working alone, there's no warning.
No warning.
Did they communicate their reasoning or was it just, you're here today?
Not that day.
Okay, but they eventually did and it sounds like.
I wasn't talking to, I was on good terms with a lot of supervisors before all this kind of blew up. So I mean, I had some chats and that's how I found out about the budget from Fort Brown, how many people they can have, because the season started out like normal. Like I was used to the previous couple seasons where, and there were like some lifts that often did have lone operators, but they were like dead. You know, like you could walk in, there's like one it's basically for the condo owners and like 10 people go up it all day. So
Yeah.
you can kind of get away with more at that, but the main lifts, like you can't just walk away from.
And I don't need your personal experience, but do you have the access to workers' comp in your positions? Is that available?
Yes, actually, I filed a workers' comp. Actually, that's a whole other can of worms because the insurance company they use is, it's Sedgwick, I'll just come out and say it, and they have a bad reputation for a reason. I actually just had to call the labor department this week because they closed the case on April 29th without telling me. And I'm still scheduled for a little more physical therapy. Plus the mileage reimbursement, because at this point I'm driving to Rutland for physical therapy from Lunenburg. It's a 3-hour drive. It's nuts. You know, and I'm not getting unemployment yet because they pay out my vacation pay and that triggers adjudication for unemployment. So I've just been digging into my savings for the last month. Eventually it'll get paid out, but it's just like, oh my God, you know? But I was also going to mention, like I worked a couple of years ago for the State Parks Trail, but we actually, myself and another guy were at Camel's Hump Mountain on the Burroughs Trail. You camp out on the state trails crew at the job site, work close by it during the work week. It was like a 2 or 3 mile hike up and it was raining, it was in the 30s all week. 2 of us actually came down and hiked the 30. We actually had to hike down to the truck in the parking lot trailhead to warm up. So it's not just like, you know, a big corporation that's kind of overlooking this stuff. It's kind of including state parks, and you would think they would have had a plan for that. You know, we pushed back a little bit. We're saying like it was literally raining so hard you couldn't even work. But our crew leader insisted that we go out and try and do something, and it just turned into, you know, pushing mud around. We had to redo everything a couple of days later. So it's like the biggest waste of our time ever. We could have done like tool maintenance under a tent or something, you know, to fill the day. In any case, I've also worked for the Forest Service. They were a lot more safety minded. I went out with fire crews and there was a whole protocol to if you're having an issue or you see something, speak up and it's very much welcome to speak up on that. But, you know, like I think there's a lot of different jobs where you're outside like that doing forestry work and stuff where I don't think you necessarily need like a heated building, but the chance to maybe walk back to the truck at times. That's what we would actually do marking timber sometimes. We just walk back to the truck. If it got crazy or the black flies were terrible, we want to break. You know, like literally you can't even breathe. They're just like out of them out there in the swamp. You know, so I think like I said, something needs to be passed so there's an actual rule in statute because the bathroom and the lunch break issue was fixed pretty quick, but 4 months later, the OSHA investigation is still open. The general duty clause is just so vague, it's like almost meaningless until somebody gets hurt.
Questions? Go ahead.
I don't have a question. I just want to thank you for coming in and giving your testimony. I'm like, I'm shocked at these conditions. And I'm sorry that you got hurt but I'm really glad that you're speaking out and you don't give up, keep doing what you're doing. It's not right
Yeah,
the
thank you.
way you've been treated, and it needs to be corrected. So thank you.
Yeah.
I also want to say, I mean, you're very clearly a person who likes working outside, who enjoys that, all those different types of work that you were talking about. So it's not that you are I mean, it's obvious that you're not a person who doesn't like being outside and that's why you're complaining about it. You just want it to be more humane while you're out there.
Yeah. When you hit, I mean, like in the winter working the ski area, when it hits 50 degrees, I'm sweating I'm roasting. But when it hits like 10 degrees and it's blowing 30-mile-an-hour wind gusts, it's like, I want to be rotating into that lift shack and warming up off, it's
We don't let kids outside on the playground when it's single digits. I think
It was below 0. Yeah. 0 and below.
Questions? Casey, 1,000 thank you.
Thank
you.
I guess.
for letting me come.
Okay, and we have your documents on the
Yeah.
website.
Yeah.
Posted under his name today.
Including the language. post.
Yeah, including the
Yeah,
language
everything.
proposed, I think. Is that right?
Correct. I'm ready to vote on that language. Yeah, just FYI.
Thank you, Casey. Appreciate
I'm
it.
just saying that
Our last witness for today is
Oh,
Molly
God.
Maher. Molly here.
Yes. Yeah, true.
Molly is president of the Vermont Ski Areas Association.
Yes.
And Molly, were you in the room when the committee introduced itself?
I was, yes.
Well, in that case, introduce yourself to us.
Do that. My name is Molly Mahar. I'm president of the Vermont Ski Areas Association. We're also known as Ski Vermont. And thank you, Chair Mahali, and to the committee for the opportunity to testify on H348 this morning. Since I haven't been in your committee yet, I'll just orient you to our organization. Briefly, we're a nonprofit trade association for the safe alpine and cross-country ski areas. We have 21 alpine and 26 cross-country areas as members, and they range from volunteer-run community areas all the way up to the state's largest ski resorts. And the ski industry is a major economic driver for Vermont, particularly in the rural parts of the state where most of them are located. The visits they drive allow other businesses in their communities to remain open year-round and provide year-round jobs. And skiing accounts for about 1/3 of the $4 billion in visitor spending that comes into the state each year. Now, ski areas are literally in the business of cold. Their business depends on cold weather and, in fact, thrives on it. Employees choose to work and recreate in the natural environment at ski areas, knowing about and often embracing winter conditions. And ski areas also have many indoor jobs as well. Working in winter conditions requires ski areas to have a culture of safety, a strong culture of safety. And this is something that all ski areas take seriously for both guests and employees. And along with the physical assets of a ski area, the mountains, the lifts, and snowmaking, employees at a ski area are a ski area's biggest asset. Healthy and safe employees are essential to a productive workforce, and ski areas are operating in a competitive hiring environment like many other businesses are, and staff retention is very important. Ski area operations are driven by the weather, as you might guess, so dynamic weather conditions are constantly factored into a ski area's operations on a daily, hourly, and sometimes even a minute-to-minute basis. And this extends to planning and adjusting employee breaks when colder than normal weather conditions are expected. And because there's a wide variety of jobs at ski areas, different departments have operational schedules which include breaks for their staff, and they're always compliant with federal law at a minimum. Breaks may look different for someone working in an office environment versus someone who's working as a snowmaker, for example. And both the cold and heat components of H348 are concerning to us. However, in the interest of time, I'll focus my testimony on the cold sections of the bill. And I'll say in general, this bill is overly prescriptive and would make it difficult for ski areas and other employers to operate efficiently while maintaining compliance. And we don't believe that this bill would achieve meaningful improvements in worker safety. And I'd like to just talk about 4 of the requirements that stand out. It's not necessarily an exhaustive list, but the temperature trigger, the cold trigger of 60 degrees Fahrenheit is not practical for Vermont. We have months of sustained temperatures below this threshold, and this bill would make normal outdoor work more costly and difficult for more than half the year. Monitoring of temperatures. A ski area's work site, as you might guess, is the entire mountain. So it runs from the base of the mountain all the way up to perhaps 4,000 feet, depending on the ski area. And so it's not reasonable to monitor temperature triggers for every employee up and down the mountain. Conditions will vary a lot, and many staff are mobile while they're performing their daily duties. The minimum 15-minute breaks every 2 hours may not be reasonable for outdoor activity staff like a ski instructor. If they're teaching a 3-hour lesson. In the case of an instructor, this interrupts the activity that the guest is seeking and interferes with the instructor's primary responsibility to keep themselves and their staff as safe as possible on the mountain by regularly observing changing weather conditions and adapting lessons or routes so that everyone is comfortable. And finally, the preventative temperature breaks. Employees would be able to take unlimited preventative temperature breaks, leaving employers without any ability to manage work schedules and expectations. Vermont ski areas are following existing laws and already have practices in place, including training to protect workers from extreme temperature impacts. H348 is not necessary because employers already have significant federal obligations under the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, which effectively regulate workplace temperature hazards. And the general duty clause, which you've heard about several times, says that employers must maintain a workplace free from recognized hazards that could cause death or serious harm. And OSHA has already used this clause to hold employers accountable for unsafe heat and cold exposures. Employers must prevent hypothermia, frostbite, and trench foot through use of heated shelters, layered clothing, and training. And although OSHA does not have a specific standard that covers working in cold environments, employers still have a responsibility to provide workers with a place of employment that is free from recognized hazards, including winter weather-related hazards. And under the general duty clause, employers have a responsibility to proactively identify and address workplace hazards, even if those hazards are not specifically covered by a standard. And before I wrap up, I just wanted to respond to several points regarding ski area operations that were made by one of the witnesses that were in for your committee last week representing the Teamsters. First, it was suggested that managers may not be here locally. And I do want to say that all Vermont ski areas have local management teams regardless of their ownership structure. We have general managers, and supervisors who are on site and responding to conditions on the ground every day. Second, it was said that ski areas, quote, rely on a lot of immigrant labor, unquote, end quote. And this is not true. Ski areas do employ international workers, but they're here on temporary worker visas, either an H-2B, which is a non-agricultural temporary worker visa, or a J-1 student cultural exchange visa. So they are not immigrants. And then finally, it was said that ski areas used to follow manufacturer recommendations for staffing with 2 people on a lift, 1 person assisting on the lift and 1 person in the lift shack. I think he used a different word, but running the lift. And in practice, ski areas in the US must follow a national lift safety standard. It's called the ANSI B77-2022 standard, which says that the staffing requirements, if any, specified by the area lift manufacturer shall be observed. So that is a requirement for all ski areas in the country, and they continue to follow manufacturer recommendations. Further,
Sure. It's more of a favor. Could you send us that standard or send it to Magali so we can have it? Or
the B77 is a book that's about this thick, but I probably can make that available to you. It's not available. Well, you need to purchase it online, but
if I Google it, what do I look up?
I would, look up ANSI, so ANSI.
F is in Frank.
ANSI.
ANS, as in Sam, I, yep, B77.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So ski areas in Vermont also have to follow the Vermont Passenger Tramway Safety Rules and Addendum to the ANSI B77 code. And that can be found on the Vermont Department of Labor's website, so you can download it there. So that's an addendum to the full national standard. There is a Vermont Tramway Board, as the prior witness mentioned, and that is housed within the Department of Labor. And that adopts rules governing the construction, operation, and maintenance of aerial tramways, aerial lifts, surface lifts, and tows. The Tramway Board employs several lift inspectors who conduct inspections year-round at all Vermont ski areas. Sometimes these inspections are scheduled, particularly during construction season if they're constructing a lift. But most are unscheduled visits, so inspectors can see how operations are being conducted. You know, a lot of times ski areas may not even know that the inspector is on site on any given day. So that concludes my testimony. I'm happy to try to answer any questions that the committee has, and I appreciate your time this morning.
I do have a few questions. My first one is actually for Sophie, if you don't mind, please, and thank you. Talking about the floor. So if ski, not programs, but
Operations.
thank you, operations have to follow this standard. What is the floor? Is it the standard? Who would? Do you get what I'm trying to say? I'm struggling.
I'm not familiar with them, so I don't know, but if it's a national standard that's required to be followed, then that would establish a floor and then
Okay.
it must be met.
Okay,
State law is always more protective.
yeah. Okay, that was just kind of, I wanted to, because this is the first time I'm hearing about this standard. And then is there, so, you know, in any workplace, you have to kind of put the regulations up every year and update that. Is there any communication to employees about best practices on keeping warm currently, or is that?
Well, ski areas definitely train employees
Okay.
about
So if
you know, the symptoms of heat or cold, and also, and I would say not even just, well, training employees, but also trying to educate our guests too,
Yeah.
about if you're going outside on a cold day, you know, you should eat a good breakfast so you have fuel in your body to stay warm. You should take frequent breaks and pay attention to, you know, signs of frostbite and things like that.
So
yeah.
I'm a new employee. I'm a brand new baby employee who has never worked in a ski lift. I would be trained, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Tom.
So with regard to the Vermont Tramway rules or ANSI, who enforces it and how? There's an inspector.
Yes.
What leverage do they have to enforce compliance?
They can shut lifts down. All the lifts need to be inspected prior to opening every season. So if a lift is running in the winter and then again in the summer, it needs to be inspected before it opens in the winter and before it opens in the summer. So that's sort of the first thing, is they need to have that inspection done, and they can't run without that inspection. So it's the lift inspectors, and
So they cover the mechanics of the lift. Are they also looking at who is staffing it, how many people are staffing it, what's required? Okay. So what would happen in a situation such as we're hearing from Vail? Who is supposed to follow up if they have one person on a lift that should be manned by two?
Well, the standard doesn't call for that. So
If the manufacturer does, it's not one of these standards. I just heard something about the manufacturer's recommendation.
they do, and the manufacturers some of them don't make recommendations, but often if they do, they're minimal in following what the B77 says. And typically it's a operator at the top, operator at the bottom is the minimum standard.
Okay.
Yeah. What time are you done?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you said that there's no immigrants that are hired?
Correct. Yeah, the international workers are here on temporary work visas.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I was just curious why you, what the difference you want to, like, why is that distinction important in your mind?
Well, I just wanted to correct the record because it was said that the ski industry relies on immigrant labor and that it doesn't necessarily have any bearing here, but it's just, it's not a true statement. So I just wanted to correct the record.
So can you distinguish why that is important in terms of why would it be important to distinguish that it does not rely on immigrant labor? And why
Well,
it's
just
important
to
to
say that-
define what an immigrant is?
That ski areas don't hire.
I've heard you
labor,
say
that's
that.
all,
What
yeah.
I'm asking is, why was it important for you to clear that statement? What is it about relying or not relying on immigrants and defining immigrants and immigrant labor? Why is that important for us?
Well,
to know?
people that are employed at a ski area are either here on a work visa or they have, an I-9 that shows that they're available to be, or they can be employed. So that's it.
I've raised my kids with the children of a lot of those temporary work visa moms, and they stay and build families here. And, there's a lot of immigration thanks to those programs, actually.
I don't think it was a comment on whether it was bad or not.
I think that it might have an undertone is what I'm taking issue with.
And I think that can be a committee discussion and that we can discuss.
No,
that.
because it's something that we're getting an official witness testimony that is saying this is the position of the ski association. And so I would just wanted to give you the opportunity to indicate
Sure.
why it was important for you to indicate that they are not immigrants. So
Could I clarify then?
thanks.
So often, I think there's a lot of confusion between international workers that are here on a temporary work visa and someone who's an immigrant. There's no judgment on immigrants one way or the other, but I think sometimes, I'll get the question, the ski industry hires immigrant labor, and it's just not a correct statement. We don't hire immigrant labor, and so I think just in terms of, compliance with hiring and things like that, it's just not a correct statement. Is all that I'm trying to clarify.
I mean, they do live here for 6 months.
If
at
someone
least.
comes to you with a green card, do you not hire them?
That I don't know the answer to, actually, so.
Can I maybe potentially say what I might be hearing and you tell me if I'm just completely wrong and I will happily, take that one. I'm hearing right now, there's a lot of concern with the current administration and the idea of, and we all know it, Vermont relies on undocumented labor. We know that. And I think you are, from what I'm hearing, just trying to say that that is not currently something that the industry is relying on. Correct. And so we have a bill that we just passed that's talking about, and we've talked about in this committee, that immigration and immigrant status is a spectrum. It could mean a lot of different things, whether that is somebody who might be here on a work or student visa, but it maybe immigrant isn't the right word that we're using. We're really talking about undocumented labor. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Well,
Wait, sorry, I
Yes.
did
yes,
have a question on enforcement and inspection. if somebody says, if somebody working a lift goes, hey, I noticed this was off and a skier, I'm so sorry.
Not everybody is.
My cold sport is skating and hockey, so I can do that year round. But if someone's like, something's wrong with the lift and you have to have as long as that complaint or statement is made, even if it's not part of the 2 inspections per or 1 inspection per season, will somebody go out and inspect it? Like what happens?
They employ lift maintenance workers that are on site all the time. And so that would be what would happen is if somebody thinks that something is not right, they would call lift maintenance and they would come right over and they respond very quickly when they're called to go look at and go troubleshoot what's going on with the lift. So yes.
Thank you.
And I will add that there are certain things, and I'd have to get back to you on exactly what they are, but if there is a scheduled shutdown for maintenance, there are certain reportable incidents to the tramway board. So, you know, when certain things happen, they need to proactively report that to the tramway board, and they'll either send an inspector out or not, depending on what it is.
I do have
Thank
another-
you.
You may, want to have someone in from there.
Yeah, actually, that might, because I'm wondering, do they have the authority for rulemaking themselves, the tramway board, or only for enforcing the standards that are?
They do rules, but it goes through the rulemaking process. So it goes through LCAR. Because they just like that, the addendum that they passed, that was renewed, that was updated because we had the 2022 ANSI B 77 that's updated every so often. So the last one was 2017 and then 2022. So when we adopt a new version of that, then they update the addendum that goes with it.
And
And then that is adopted through the rulemaking process.
that's through LCAR.
Yes.
But also you said that ANSI B 77 essentially said you have to follow the manufacturer's recommendation.
That's correct.
That may vary considerably. Some of them are more specific. Some of them only deal with the equipment. Some of them deal with operation.
Generally speaking, they don't say a whole lot about like a minimum amount. I mean, I reviewed some before I came in here today, just to make sure that I knew what they said. They're from one manufacturer. There are, several manufacturers, but yes, that is a safety rule that they must follow.
They must follow whatever those recommendations.
That's correct.
LCAR is the Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules.
And Higley is our
actual,
That's
shadow government.
And
and it, Mark or
Like conference committee.
it's LCAR, just for your, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Before we adjourn, let's just take a moment to talk, and I said the word, but we're not doing it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Higley, Mark Higley, it's on LCAR.
Yeah, as is, what's his name? Dennis Squirrel
Oh,
is the chair.
Trevor?
Trevor Squirrel is the chair. Trevor Squirrel is the chair. And what LCAR does is it reviews any regulations and hears them, and sometimes at a lot of controversy.
Sure.
And its power is to either approve them, or if it has a negative recommendation, I don't even know what it's called, then it goes back to the agency. The agency is free to either respond, in which case it goes by altering the regulation, in which case it goes back to ELCA. Or the agency may say, no, we just disagree, and adopt the regulation as is. If they do that, and someone should challenge the regulation, the burden of proof as to the validity of the regulation shifts from the challenger to the agency. That's the effect of a disapproval, is to flip the burden of proof.
so they essentially make rules that are like the subsets of the statute.
Right.
So they're the policy versus the statute.
I know this because Trevor said.
So there was language about the guidelines for whole temperature work, would that empower them to then proceed to?
Could be.
Could be, if there was, although I'm not sure that either ANSI or the, what's the additional, the addendum
The
deals with that issue. We are, I think, done for the morning. We'll see whether there's any additional testimony on this issue, on this bill. After the floor, we are going to reconvene. And what we're going to do when reconvene is just talk about possible projects that we can undertake in the remaining time available to us. And look at sort of survey what's ahead of us. And we'll do that right after the floor, and then we'll be done. So I anticipate a fairly early adjournment this afternoon, so you can all prepare, rehearse, get ready, do whatever you're doing for the gala, which is, where is it? In the
chamber?
What?
Wasn't it in the chamber?
Capital Plaza.
Capital Plaza.
They did it in the chamber.
They did it. It's the Capital Plaza. It was last year.
You can tell how much I pay attention
Yeah, right, yeah. Capital Plaza. So, yes. Yes.
Can I just pose before we disperse? A brief moment, will you be willing to entertain a committee discussion area, or will you wait till this afternoon to do that?
Well, we have a few minutes if you would like to entertain a committee discussion, please.
Okay,
And we're waiting for Emily.
it was just less for me. I just want to make sure that before we go about our day, that we discuss, it needs to be discussed as a committee discussion, and if everyone is that, then I'm good with that. I just wanted to offer space before we take off.
You want to do what?
I just wanted to make sure that things were spaced before we left. If everyone's good, then I'm good. I just wanted to offer pause before we transition. Appreciate you.
Good. So we will,
Oh, I want to make a committee
yes,
announcement.
Yep.
You don't have to, but I got this lovely text message from a lovely individual in our committee about wearing yellow next Tuesday and some people like purple, but purple complements yellow, about recognizing Black Maternal Health Month, which is this month. And well, not April.
But
We're in May.
reading
Oh my
it.
God,
We're
we're in
reading it
May.
I'm gonna have.
But yeah, I'm still in April. I apologize, but in case other people are not getting the text